Welcome to the Soul Winning Students Podcast, giving students the tools they need to lovingly defend and share their Christian faith. All right, welcome to the very first Soul Winning Students Podcast. I have special guest J. Warner Wallace on the line from standtoreason.org. He's also the author of Cold Case Christianity, and he has a really interesting background. And Jim, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just start off with your backstory.
Well, I was just somebody who never thought I'd be doing anything for the kingdom. I never thought I would be a Christian. And it was somebody who was pretty, I think, pretty independent, I guess, growing up, and really thought that reason and science would have answers for life's big questions. And I never really thought there was any, although there weren't answers for everything, I had some unanswered questions myself as a naturalist. I really believe that the best opportunity we had going forward to get the answers would have been through the sciences or through just my own reasoning ability. And didn't have any, bumps in my road in terms of my life story. I had a pretty easy run of it, in the sense that I know some people will look at larger issues in life once they've had their own struggles and misfortunes. And I didn't have any struggles or misfortunes, so I didn't have those kinds of things that would maybe prompt me to even, and I'm grateful that I didn't have those actually, because I think even, of course, I'm grateful not to have troubles, but I'm even more grateful not to have come to the truth of this by way of some need I was trying to meet, and maybe I couldn't meet it through my naturalistic expectations or my goals or pursuits. I really was just somebody who happened to go into a church at the age of 35. My wife we were raising young kids, young boys, and my wife was interested, kind of cultural curiosity as to what, being part of a church might involve with the boys, if it would be helpful for her. And I was more than willing to go to church as a non-believer. Didn't think there was any need. She was more than happy for me to attend as a non-believer. She never was the kind of person who would say, yeah, I need you to step out here and believe what I believe. To be honest, I can tell you that she may have been had cultural exposure to Catholicism more than anything else, but she had no more idea what Christianity entailed than I did. So we were in a church. I was 35, and the pastor was able to intrigue me in this person named Jesus, who I, of course, had great cultural, familiarity with. I knew the story of Jesus roughly. My mom was a Catholic, kind of cultural Catholic growing up, and so I heard the stories of Jesus even as a young boy. Went through that part of the system there, in the Catholic Church, and just never believed any of it. But I was definitely familiar with the rough outline of Jesus's life and the stories that are told to young kids, and heard a lot of that. Rejected all of it. But this particular pastor, he was able to interest me in maybe this, there's maybe some ancient wisdom. I thought to myself, well, maybe there's a reason why this Christian fable has transcended time. Maybe there's something about the teaching of Jesus and his wisdom that's the thing that people see value in, and maybe there's something so profound, like the teaching of Socrates, or the teaching of Baha'u'llah, or the teaching of Buddha, the teaching of any ancient sage, that would cause me to, be interested in let's just steal the wisdom of Jesus. So I bought my first Bible and began to read through the red letters. And for me, that's what started the journey, because I started to recognize characteristics in the Gospels that I really did recognize from my own casework when I've got more than one witness who sees an event. And although, of course, these are, written, they're not precisely equivalent, of course, to working with eyewitness statements. But when you work cold cases, you're always first encountering the witnesses from 35 years ago by reading their 35 or 30-year-old witness accounts that have been written down by the first detectives. So you do actually begin with a number of narratives that are put in your lap that you have to then compare to one another. Now, eventually, the great benefit is I'm going to get to go to talk to those folks again. And if they're still alive, I can ask them questions about their accounts. I've always thought, if you were to, sometimes skeptics will kind of look at the accounts from Scripture, and they'll kind of redact out, doing some textual criticism, try to figure out what's really going on in the text. If you were to take that same approach, just using, let's say, the 4 witnesses I might have in a cold case, you would come to the craziest conclusions. And if you just go talk to those 4 witnesses, this thing that you thought was left out because you know this didn't happen a certain way and it was intentionally left out, and then you talk to the witness and you say, hey, why did you say it that way? Or why didn't you say anything about that at all? And they'll say, well, nobody asked me. If you'd asked me, I would have told you. And so it's like, you realize that sometimes these things that we give great authority in textual analysis of the ancient documents just really end up being the way this guy decided to tell it. And it really nothing more than that, nothing more sinister, nothing more provocative, just so I think that my experience as a cold case detective helped me out a ton, and it helped me to do this. Now, I know for lots of young people who are listening to this, here's what it comes down to. I had an experience as a detective, and it helped me to look at the Gospels like a detective, and I was able to use the skills of a detective to come to trust what the Gospels actually tell me about Jesus. So I'll try to keep it simple going forward, but that's really what happened to me.
Yeah. So and I was going to say it's a good lead into kind of your book here, because your book really gets into the different. The different, it exposes the methods that detectives use and applying them to the gospel. And I remember the one thing to me that just really stuck out that made things, it was a great illustration of the reliability of the text, was the scriptural chain of custody. I remember the first time seeing that graphic just had a really powerful effect. Maybe you can explain that really quick for the kids. Or for students, sorry.
Yeah, no
they don't like being called
exactly.
kids.
No, I know. I feel the same way. By the way, I don't want to start off I kind of get wrapped up in your own story. I realize that we're want to be specific to the needs of students, and they're a little bit different. Young people, I think, are the most important group in the entire church. If you're a young person and you're either in junior high, high school, I'm not even going to college. If you're in that age group, that's a broad age group, right? Say from, let's say, 12 to 25. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty broad age group there. There's a lot of different things happen in your life from 12 to 25. But I can tell you that that's the age group. It's you guys and gals who are out there who are in that age group who have the most responsibility. You're going to be the most under attack when you finally get to the university. Now is the time to decide, is this true or is it false? And why is it true? And why is it false? And the biggest skepticism I had as a young person, all the way till I was 35, was that I believed there's no way those miracles could have happened as they're described in the Gospels. No way. No way that could be true. I might accept some parts of the gospel. Maybe Jesus lived. He taught some good things. But there's no way I could accept the miracles. No way. And so I figured one of two things happened. One, they were written so late in history that everyone who really knew Jesus was already dead by the time they wrote these things. So they could write all kinds of lies about him. And nobody would know because they were already dead. Or they wrote them early. And maybe they were even written by people who were really eyewitnesses, but the first versions could not have contained the miracles. That had to be added late over time. And it was all about my rejection of miraculous things, okay? Mm-hmm. So if you're a young person who has the same kind of, you're surrounded by, all the science fiction we watch, and it sounds like, when you watch movies and play video games, it feels like science can answer every question. Well, I was the kind of person who said, well, I reject anything miraculous. So, therefore, one of those two things had to happen with the story of Jesus. So my work, was just about trying to figure out, were these written early? And when they were written early, if they were, what did they look like back then? Were they changed over time? So the simple guy named Jesus, who was a sweet guy who taught some cool things, later on, the believers started to insert little accounts of miracles, and before you know it, he's now rising from the dead. Or is the earliest version of Jesus the same as the one we have today? And was it written early enough to have been written by true eyewitnesses? And that was the big thing for me. And so that's exactly what I tried to look at in the book. And also, that was my own experience. I think there's a good case for the earliest dating of the Gospels. I do think they were written early enough in history to have been written by the eyewitnesses who actually saw this stuff. And I make a case for that in the book. And then two, I think there's good reason to believe that this story has not been changed over the years, because it's still this. We have snapshots of the story of Jesus from the gospel writers, and then we have a snapshot from the students of the gospel writers, and then we have a snapshot from the students of the students, and we can follow this chain of pictures of Jesus all the way down through history. And guess what? They never changed. That Jesus is always the guy who was born of a virgin, who claimed to be God, who worked miracles, and rose from the dead. So here's the problem we all have. We're stuck with a version of Jesus that is so miraculous, and it comes so early that it's written by people who would have to have written it at a time when, if he wasn't who they said he was, the people who were in history, who lived back then, it's written so early they would have seen it coming and said, wait a minute, don't talk to me about Jesus. I know who Jesus was. He wasn't that guy you're talking about. Now, you can make a lie like this. You can get away with a lie if you write it late in history. But if you write it early in history, it's a lot harder to get away with a lie. And that's why I think that the early dating of the Gospels and the fact that we can follow them down through history, those are powerful pieces of evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. That, like I said, that impacted me quite a bit when I saw that as well. Now, you work a lot with young people. That's where I believe you started kind of encouraging people to go out and do evangelism, if I recall correctly.
Yes, that's true.
So what are some misconceptions that your students have about evangelism and apologetics before they go out and actually do it?
Well, I think it's first of all, it's just a fear factor, right? And a lot of that comes down to, you just got to admit it, a lot of our fear related to sharing what we believe about Christianity is really based in how we're going to look to the world around us. We are afraid of looking stupid. That's what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. And look, we all have that fear. I have that fear too. It's like you don't want to go out and talk to people and have them laugh at you or mock you, or am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to look like a fool? This all comes down to our own concerns about us more than anything else, right? More than the rightness or wrongness of doing. We all know we should do it. We all even think, well, I want to do it, but I have a fear. And how do I overcome this fear? Now, even if I was to give you all kinds of great information and convince you that you knew what to say and how to say it, I think you still have some fear that you might mess it up. So here's what we got to do. We got to ask ourselves a question. Is this whole thing really about us? I mean, is it really about are we going to let our own arrogance and concern for how we look or feel rule the day, or are we just going to man up and get out there and do the job? And I think a lot of us, I can tell you as a police officer, there were lots of occasions when I really didn't want to be the one that had to go in there and break up this party, or didn't want to go in there and sort this mess out, or go into that bar and break up that fight. And it wasn't just a fear of getting hurt, because I always usually had a lot of partners with me. It was really a fear that you would just mess it up. Somehow you'd fail, or your authority wouldn't be respected, as you walk in with your uniform and you look like a fool in front of people. And that you have to overcome fear every time you put on that uniform. And I think this is what happens with us as Christians. If you're going to wear the Christian uniform, there's a reason why Jesus said you're going to pick up your cross and follow me. That he was talking about much more severe persecution than we're going to face. But if you're going to identify yourself as a Christian, get ready. You're going to have to overcome fear. Now, which would you rather have? A life in which you never had to face your fears? Do you think that people who never face their fears ever really end up being courageous? You can't be courageous until you have a fear to face. So I think the problem is most of us respect courage, and we think that's a noble thing, and we want to be courageous. Well, here's your opportunity. You've got to be courageous when it's time to go out and share the truth about the gospel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember the very first time I went out and handed out a gospel tract. Kind of a funny story. There's a very first time I had my $1 million bill tract. I'm out in Portland, Oregon, and I see this, kind of homeless looking guy, and I walk up to him and I hand him the gospel tract, and I'm like, oh, hey, this is for you. And I'm, scared. My heart's racing at 300 beats per minute. And the guy ends up telling me over the course of the next 30 seconds that he had just gotten released from prison for murder.
Wow.
And I was like,
thinking, how scared you were before, you're even more scared.
Exactly.
Right.
And not to puff myself up or anything, but it was for me a matter of just pushing through the fear, recognizing it, and keep doing it. And I think that's right. What all of us believers have to just get through at some point. Like, you know what? Yeah, I'm afraid, but I still got to do it.
Well, let me tell you, I bet you most young people already know how to do this. They already know how this feels because they are already involved in some athletic activity or challenge that they've had to push through a little bit of pain in order to have some great gain. If you're already playing on a soccer team, or you're playing on a baseball team, or a football team, or a volleyball team, whatever it is, the first day you get to practice, you just know what the coach is going to do. He thinks you're out of shape. He's going to run you. He's going to run you and run you and run you and run you. And that's just part of what you have to do in order to be prepared. But you're willing to put up with the pain because you know there's something good waiting there at the end of that. Mm-hmm. And that's really what happens here, that you're going to have to push through the discomfort. But the minute you do, the minute you push through it, you're going to find that it's worth it. And then suddenly the next time you do it, it's not quite so painful. It's like running. The next time you run that mile for your coach, it's a little easier. And that's what happens here, too. So you have to push through the first moments for sure.
Absolutely. So what advantages or disadvantages do you think students have when compared to adults when engaging in apologetics and evangelism?
Okay, I think this is where it's so cool. And I can tell you this firsthand. I had a church that I planted with college-age students. I had it for 6 years, and then until I wrote the book, and then I know I needed that. I was gone from my home church so often that I finally told people I had to step out because I wasn't doing them a service. I'm in church every Sunday. I'm just not in my church every Sunday. I'm in somebody else's church doing a presentation. So I needed to move out. But I had a church of all young people for the first 3 or 4 years, and then eventually a lot of these kids went away to college or got married and moved away, and I was left with their parents. So I had early 20-somethings, and then I was left with late 40 and 50-somethings. And what I noticed right away was this vacuum suck of energy and passion out of our group. Young people have passion. Two things that young people have that I think are so important that old folks like me sometimes forget and we lose. One is passion. Two is teachability. Can you be teachable? Can you learn something new? Are you willing to learn something new? Or do you get to the point in your life where you think you know everything and you just don't even have the desire to be uncomfortable or the desire to push out to learn something new? If you just stay passionate and comfortable and teachable, you will actually do great things for the kingdom. And so I think the young people have that advantage over older people because they are wired this way. They're already in an environment where they know they're constantly having to learn new things. If it's at school or college or a new job, whatever, you're constantly learning new things. By the time you're 50, you feel like you kind of learned everything you're just in a groove. You're in a comfort zone. You're just in this groove, and you, quite frankly, you become lazy. And that's where I found that most of us are at an older age. So I think young people do have the ability to change the world at probably much faster pace than older folks would.
Yeah, I think we'd see that in the culture now, especially with regards to expressing acceptance of, say, homosexuality and stuff like that, which is just rampaging at an incredible rate.
Yeah, no, it is for sure.
It's funny. The next question I'd written down for you was, what can adults do to help motivate students to engage in evangelism? But after your last question, I think I should switch it around and say, what can students do to help get their parents engaged in evangelism?
Yeah, I think that the best thing all of you can do as young Christians is make sure you push your youth pastors to do the things that you actually are willing to do that maybe they haven't even asked you to do yet. So, I mean, you can be a youth pastor, you can be in a youth group for, years and really go to, summer camp, and then you have winter camp, and then you have your Sunday programs, you have midweek on Wednesday where you're doing some Bible studies, and, the whole year can go by without really making an effort to get out in your community and share the gospel. And I think most of the young students in your ministry be willing to do it. You guys have to ask your leaders, hey, let's go do this. And once they see, look, I can tell you this, youth pastors are always looking for what it is their young people, what fires up their young people. If they realize that their young people will be fired up by going out and sharing the gospel, they're far more likely to do that. So I think that the first thing that you have to do in your youth group is don't just sit there and be satisfied with games and pizza and gospel light on Sunday mornings. You guys know what you're capable of. You guys are in AP classes. You're in your all the different clubs, sports you guys are playing. You know what it is to raise the bar. Why wouldn't you want to raise the bar in your youth group? So I think that I would challenge you to get back in your youth group and to raise the bar with your youth pastors to get them interested in doing the stuff that you're willing to do that maybe they haven't even asked you to do yet.
All right. Well, Jim, thanks a lot for your time. Is there any parting thoughts or wisdom you wish to impart on us?
Yeah, I just want to encourage young people to own your faith for yourself. Look, there's a lot of people who are in the church and identify themselves as Christians, and are even, I would say, saved. They trust Christ for their salvation, so they're saved. But if you push them as to why they think this is even true, they really can't defend what they believe at all. I'm going to tell you what I call that. It's what I call accidental Christians. They happen to hold to the truth. They happen to be in the true worldview. They happen to be saved by the truth, but they couldn't defend it if they were asked to. And I think while that doesn't really challenge their salvation, I think they're saved, it does limit their effectiveness in the world around them. So I would challenge you, if you are in the church right now, because maybe your parents have been dragging you to church for all these years, or you're in the church and you actually say, I'm a believer, but I really couldn't answer tough questions. If there's a loving God who's all-powerful and all-loving, why is there evil in the world? Why is there so much pain and suffering? Why did bad things happen to good people? How do I answer these kinds of questions? And you believe that Jesus really existed, but how do I know for sure that he was really a person in history? These are the kinds of questions that eventually someone's going to ask you. And some professor is really going to push your buttons on these things. And then when it gets to that point, accidental Christianity will not be sufficient. You're going to have to, at that point, have good answers or be prepared to get rattled. And so my encouragement to everyone who's listening to this, young people who are listening to this, is to own your faith. That isn't your parents' faith. Why would you want to embrace blindly your parents' faith? Instead, you want to know if this is true. I want you to know more about what you believe than your parents even know about what they believe. I want you to raise the bar. So I just want to encourage you as I leave here, just to take the time and do the hard work of studying why you believe what you believe. And I think that, Neil, you're in the perfect position to help young people and provide resources to young people to get that job done.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jim. I do appreciate it.